guys, welcome back to my channel and another episode of Raw Moments. This is episode 4, I believe, and today we are talking about my journey through depression. This is definitely a topic that I would not have chosen to talk about. I have touched on, certain things, but I've never done a complete video taking a deep dive into my journey. It's extremely personal, and I'm also going to put a trigger warning right here just in case this video may be a little bit much for some people. This is definitely uncensored, and we're taking a deep dive. So the other day I was watching a YouTube sermon from T.D. Jake's daughter, and she was telling a story about Mary and having Jesus and whatever, and how she didn't understand or 100% believe that she was gonna have this baby that was gonna change the whole world. And she did what she needed to anyway because she trusted in God's promise. And she went and talked about a certain part of that story where it was she got reassurance that this is what was going to happen, but that there was going to be so much more turmoil that happened before the great big thing happened. And I knew that when I watched that, it was confirmation that I was supposed to talk about this week, just because I really didn't know what I was going to be filming or what I was going to be talking about. And so I just prayed on it, and it was for me to talk about in depth my journey through depression. And I didn't understand why, nor did I honestly really want to do it, because one, it's personal to me and triggering, and I'm just private, and sharing certain details of things is just it's a lot. But after watching that, I knew, and it was confirmation, this is why it made sense to me in that moment why I needed to talk about it. So we'll go back there at the end of this video, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a brief to explain how I got to this point in sharing this, side of my journey. But anyways, let's take it all the way back to 4 years ago. Actually, we're gonna take it back to 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, what felt out of nowhere to me, I started to feel a shift in my energy and my moods, but I didn't know at all why I was feeling like that. And it wasn't a consistent thing. So in the beginning, it wasn't a consistent thing. And I noticed it just because I'm genuinely a happy person. I'm always laughing, smiling. I hate to be angry or sad or, anything like that. And I would have these phases where I would just break down crying, but not for a specific reason. Now, don't get me wrong, I am a crier. I cry all the time. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. I cry when I'm angry. I am a crier, but the way that I would break down in tears was just different, because it wasn't anything that was happening that made me cry. It was just out of nowhere, I would just start crying. And that happened on and off for maybe like 2 months, that was happening. But I kind of like ignored it. I didn't know what to call it, what was happening. So I didn't pay attention to it too much. Then after, the 2 months, it started getting worse. And it got to a point where it kind of felt like it was happening like every day. And I would wake up in the morning because I worked at the time. I worked for an after school program. So my work day didn't start until maybe like 1-ish. So I had like the morning and like the beginning part of the afternoon to do whatever. And so I would wake up, and from the time that I woke up until the time that it was time for me to clock into work, I was just in a bad mood. I was sad, I was crying, I wasn't understanding what was going on because nothing was happening in front of me. Nothing was happening. So I didn't understand like what were these emotions coming from. And the moment I clocked into work, it was like I was fine. Nothing, nothing in the morning happened. I was fine while I was at work. But when it was time for me to clock out of work and go home, it was like all these emotions came back. And that started to be really constant for me. That was like an everyday thing. Over time, it just kept getting worse. And I still didn't know what was going on, but at that time I did know that something was wrong, because it was happening every single day and it just like increasingly got worse. But nobody knew that I was feeling like this or going through this because I hid it very well. And in the morning, because I live at home with my mom and my brother at the time, and they didn't see me in the morning because my brother has school, my mom has work, so I was by myself in the morning time. And then by the time I got home from work, they were back, but it was like I was tired and I just went to my room. So nobody was really seeing me in these like breakdown moments. But I knew that something was wrong. I knew something was off. I just didn't know what it was. And eventually, to me, it felt like it, went away or it stopped. And so when that happened, it was like, okay, like, I don't know, maybe I was just, I don't know. I didn't know what to call it. And so fast forward to a year after that, it was 2019, and I started feeling it again. But this time when I was feeling it, it felt like it started really bad, and it wasn't like before. I felt like there was like buildup or kind of like a few transitions before it felt really bad. But this time when it came, it was really bad. And that was, I think, maybe COVID hadn't happened yet, but I think it was around, it was 2019 when I started feeling it again. And that whole year was just like ups and downs of my moods and, not understanding what was going on, but still me trying to hide what was happening. And still at that time, I didn't know that I was depressed, but it was me crying. It was me being angry. It was me being sad. It was like all of these emotions, but I felt all of these emotions really intensely. And during that time too, I was having really, really, really bad panic attacks. and I would, be out, and then out of nowhere, it was like, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like it was really bad. And so that was 2019, and then 2020 is when COVID hit. So when COVID hit, everybody has to be at home. Nobody's out of the house. And by that time, I was so deep in whatever it was that I was feeling that it was impossible for me to hide anymore, because I was deep in what I was feeling, but also now everybody's at home. So everybody can see, me not being in a good mood. And it was my mom that recognized that I was depressed. But initially when she told me, I was like, no, I'm not. I don't think that's what it is. I don't know what's wrong, but I know something's wrong, but I don't know that it's that. And I also had no previous knowledge of what depression was or what it felt like, or anything like that. And I've always had anxiety, but my anxiety just hadn't always been that bad consistently. I had bad anxiety, but it was like in situations my anxiety was heightened and it was bad. Around this time, my anxiety was just bad all the time. And so, she kept telling me like, no, that's what it is. I was still working at this time, but remotely. And the more I was at home, the more I had to pay attention to the fact that something was wrong. Like I didn't have much of a distraction anymore, even though I was still working. But when you work remotely, it's just different than like, you're at home. So you have a little bit more, you're a little bit more relaxed when you're at home versus if I was like physically at work, I'm moving around, I'm having conversations with people, I'm, whatever. And when I was working remotely, it was like a morning meeting, do your work, afternoon meeting, you're off. Like there was no like consistent talking to anybody or being around people. And so I was forced to like pay attention to the fact that I wasn't okay. And I've had people ask me like, oh, do you think that COVID is, what made you depressed? Because I do know that COVID definitely did, cause a lot of people to be depressed, because that was a time when we're all in the house and we can't leave, we can't do anything, we can't. So, like I understood that, but COVID was actually the reason I recognized that I was already depressed. So, I started making a lot of excuses to not work, which was really, really unlike me, because I very rarely called out sick. I very rarely, called out for any reason for work. And I noticed that I started making up so many different excuses of why I couldn't work. And I was already working remotely, so it was almost like why call off your remote? You're not, physically going in anywhere. But I noticed that I had started doing that, and my behavior towards a lot of things changed, where I just didn't have interest to do anything. I wanted to be by myself all the time. I didn't really want to talk to anybody, and I started shutting people out. And the people that were closest to me, I did open up to them at the time. I did open up to them and, tell them that something was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong, but, for them to be patient with me, because I wasn't myself. I knew I wasn't myself. And I'm sure they probably did their best that they could to support me, but it wasn't what I needed. And so eventually those people were no longer in my life, and it was just my mom, who saw literally everything, and my best friend, who saw literally everything, and everyone else was like, I tried my best to disguise or not show what was going on, but it was very obvious that something was off that something was wrong, because I was the complete opposite of what my personality was. And so I started shutting out a lot of people, and only the people that saw me every day were the people that could see really what I was going through. But anybody that didn't see me every day didn't really know what was going on. And, you know, I had a few people that, you know, tried to like check on me and, you know, are you okay? Like, what's going on? But because I'm so private, I didn't, you know, open up to anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody, and I didn't know what was going on to really explain it to anybody. And so it was just like, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. But obviously people can tell that, you know, I'm being distant, or, you know, something's off. And eventually I shut a lot of people out. And in hindsight, I wish I would have gone a different way about it. But in the moment, everything, like my world felt like it was crumbling, like it was falling apart, and I didn't understand why or what was going on. And I did a lot of like blaming myself, like, what did I do wrong? Whatever I did wrong, I apologize, like I take it back. Like, why am I feeling like this? Because I had never felt anything like this before. And it got to a point where there was one night I broke down crying. Like it was like this flood of emotions, and I was angry, and I was upset, and I was hurt, and I was sad, and I was like all of these things. And I was just like, I don't understand, like, why am I feeling like this? Like, what is it? Like, please somebody tell me. And my mom was with me, and she was like, I'm telling you that you are depressed, and that's what's wrong with you. And it wasn't until I was sitting there breaking down that I really heard what she was saying. And so I was just like, okay, like, if that's what it is, then tell me how to fix it, because I don't want to feel this. I don't want to go through this. I don't understand. Like, take it away. And I remember being so frustrated and so angry that I started like hitting myself and scratching myself. And my mom's like, no, like, you gotta like calm down, like, you gotta breathe. And that was the first night, I think, that one, I you know, was like, okay, I'll say that it's depression. And two, that I had ever tried to inflict any pain on myself. And that was scary within itself, because I've never experienced anything like that before. And I'm sure for my mom to have to witness that was like scary for her. But that was like the beginning of the worst. And I thought that in that moment that would be the worst part of it. But little did I know that was nothing compared to what was about to come. And still not understanding why I was going through what I was going through, why I was feeling what I was feeling. And so over time, things just kept getting worse. I eventually took a leave of absence from work because I couldn't focus on anything. I didn't want to get out of the bed. I would stay in the bed all day long. I would barely get up to use the bathroom. It got to a point where I was not taking showers. I wasn't brushing my teeth. I wasn't doing anything. I was in the bed, but I wasn't also sleeping. So I was up every single day, every single night. I was just awake. I couldn't sleep. And in the middle of the day, I would get like little cat naps. Like I would sleep for 5 minutes and then be up, and then sleep for 10 minutes and then be up. But I would never sleep for an extended period of time, and I wasn't sleeping at all at nighttime. So I was just awake. And at that time I was binge watching a lot of shows like on Netflix or Hulu or like whatever I could, whatever shows or apps or whatever, but I was binge watching a lot of shows because that was the only way that I was able to distract myself from feeling whatever it was that I was feeling. But I didn't want to do anything. And I got to a point where I wouldn't leave the house for any reason. And then it got to a point where I wouldn't leave my room. And I think probably isolating myself like that made it worse for me, just because it was like, I won't leave my room, so I'm not seeing anybody. I won't leave my house, so I'm not being around people. I'm not in nature. I don't have any fresh air. Like, I completely shut down on myself at that point. And these were all things that I was, going through or feeling, and I wasn't answering phone calls or text messages. And so the people that didn't see me every day really didn't understand or know what was going on, and I had no energy to really explain it to anybody, because I still at this point did not understand why I was going through what I was going through or what I was feeling. And I knew that something was wrong and it was just getting worse, and there was nothing that I knew to do about it, and that was making me more frustrated. And so the more frustrated I got, the more I went into a darker space, and it got to a point where I was suicidal. And I never attempted anything, but I had thoughts all day long. And it wasn't that, in the beginning, I'll say, it wasn't that I didn't want to not be here anymore, but it was definitely that I didn't want to feel what I was feeling. And so for me, it was, for me to not feel what I'm feeling, then that means I don't need to be here. And that was definitely a scary time for me, because the only reason that I never attempted anything was because my brother was in the house. And I could not live with myself to know that if I had attempted something, that he would be the one to find me, because me and my brother are extremely close. Like, he is like my child. And so that was the thing that saves me from ever even attempting anything anytime that I was feeling suicidal. But when the thoughts were more increased, like when I felt like it was just all the time, and it was like I had plenty of opportunity and I had plenty of ideas of what I could do or how I could do it, it was really bad. And I remember, because at the time the house that we lived in had a pool, and the pool was a really deep pool. And we always have like Excedrin and Advil and, whatever in the house. And so there was one day where I was just like, if I just took a bunch of pills and jumped in the pool, that would do the job. And I didn't attempt to do it, but it was a thought that wasn't going away when I thought it. And it was like all day long I was having that thought, and it was like not going away. But I was telling myself, like, don't think like that. Like come on, you're not really gonna actually do that. Like, don't think that. Like, Let's stop thinking that. But it wasn't going away. And it was then that I knew like I needed help. And that what I was feeling was the most scary thing that I could possibly ever go through. And that I didn't want to put my family through that. And I didn't want to, you know, scar people for life of, you know, making a decision about something because of something that I'm feeling right now. And so I was like, I need help. And that was the first time that I tried to find a therapist. And when I tell you, I had the hardest time trying to find a therapist. And I don't understand, even till this day, why it was so hard for me and how discouraging it is when you're in that kind of dark space and it feels like nobody wants to help you when that's their job. And so I, you know, was going through my insurance and I was trying to find a therapist, and every therapist I called was like, sorry, not taking new clients, sorry, not taking new patients. I even had one therapist tell me, yeah, I'm not taking anybody, but good luck finding someone. And I just remember thinking that was so discouraging, and I am in need of real help. And that's your attitude towards me trying to get help. And I remember feeling defeated because this was over like 4 or 5 months me trying to find a therapist and couldn't find one. And so I went through a phase where I was like, well, maybe that's just a sign that you know, I'm not supposed to be here, because why can I not get help? And I'm trying so hard, and it takes so much energy out of me to even try to find one, and nobody wants to help me. And then one day I think I got a phone call from somebody, and it was for me to see a therapist. And so I obviously was like, okay, I'll take the appointment. And initially when I talked to her, she seemed like she was, you know, a nice lady and that she was helping. But in that time, it was like life or death. And so a lot of the sessions were about me not committing suicide, and less about why I was feeling what I was feeling or what was triggering me or anything like that. And so there was a time where she had asked me, it happened to be a really bad day that day, and all my days were bad days, but there were days where they were worse than others. And I happened to have therapy that day, and she was like, how are you feeling today? And, you know, I told her, I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm tired. I'm so tired. Like, I feel like I'm fighting so hard, but I'm just so tired. I don't want to fight anymore. I can't do this. I'm tired. And I just kept telling her, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. And she's like, do you have anything like around you that if you wanted to, you could, you know, hurt yourself? And I was like, yeah, I have plenty of things. But I also told her I would not attempt anything because my brother was in the house. And so she said, okay, I'm gonna give you this number because right now I feel like either you need to go on medication or I need to commit you to a psychiatric hospital. And those were my two things that I swore I never wanted to do. I told her, I never want to go into a psychiatric hospital, and I never want to take medication. Like, those were my two biggest fears. And more of me being committed was a thing than taking medication, but definitely I didn't want to do either. But she told me like, that these are your options. And so I told her, okay, I'll take the number to get emergency medication, but I don't want to be committed. I absolutely don't want to be committed. And so she said, okay. And so she gave me a number, and she was like, call the number and then call me back after you call the number. And so I was like, okay. And so I called the number, and I remember I went upstairs because I think my mom was home that day. And so I went upstairs to my mom, and I was freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh, like my biggest fear is being committed. My biggest fear is having to be on medication. And so I remember freaking out and like going to my mom and telling her like, this is what she's saying, and she's saying she's gonna have to commit me or I have to go on medication. And my mom's trying to calm me down. And so my mom's like, okay, look, call the number. I'll sit with you while you call the number. And so I called the number, and the lady that answered said that it was the number for her to 5150 me, which means to put me on a psychiatric hold for 48 to 72 hours. And I remember crying and being so distraught because I was like, wait, I don't want to be committed. That's not what I want to do. And the lady was like, well, yeah, that's what this number is for. And so I was like, okay, I'll call you back. So I hung up, and then as I was hanging up, my therapist was calling. And so when I answered, I was like, you gave me the number to a psychiatric hospital. And she was like, yeah, I think that's what you need to do. And I said, but that's not what you told me. You told me you were giving me a number to get medication. And she was like, yeah, well, you know, that's, you know, I guess. And I'm like, I told you that's not what I wanted to do. And she's like, okay, well, if you really don't want to, then you need to be on medication. And I said, okay, and I told you that I would do that, but why would you give me the number to the hospital and not to get the medication? And so she's like, well, you know, that's just what I felt that you needed to do. And so I was really upset because for me, I felt like even as a therapist, if that is your recommendation, you feel like that's what you need to do, why lie to me and tell me that you're giving me a number to something else and that's not it? And then you could have been honest, or you should have just been honest and said, no, this is what I think, this is my recommendation, than to have me call a number and thinking it's one thing and it's not. And then when I ask you about it, you're kind of like passive aggressive in a way. And so that really frustrated me. And so I never talked to her again. And then I was like, you know what? I just need to figure this out by myself. Like, this is just not gonna work. Therapy is not for me. You know, I need to figure it out alone. And so I started fighting harder and harder and harder to like pull myself out, and still not understanding why I was depressed or what I was going through. And I started doing things to kind of like try to distract myself, but nothing was really working. I tried to get myself out of my room and then trying to get myself to leave the house, but it was just like things were just not working. And we ended up moving to a different county. And so when we moved, I tried again to get another therapist. This time it was easier for me to get a therapist. And so I, you know, saw her, and she seemed like she was, you know, nice. But at this time, because of the gap of me stopping the other therapist and finding another therapist, I was trying to fight it on my own. My suicidal ideation was, you know, back, and it was like stronger than ever. And so there was a point in time where my mom wouldn't leave me at home by myself. And so I had to go to work with her, even if it was to sit in the car, but she didn't want me to be alone. And I understood, like, you know, obviously. So, but once I found the therapist, it was really close to my house. And so I went to her and I, you know, told her what had happened with the previous therapist and, you know, what I was going through. And she was trying to give me like coping mechanisms. But before I actually saw her, they had to do an evaluation on me. And I remember, because I had such a bad experience the first time, that I was really on edge the day that I was going to get the evaluation to like get the second therapist. And I remember being like, oh, I really don't want to do this, but I know I need to because I need help. I can't do this by myself. I need help. And on the way there, I was driving and there was a big rig next to me. And I remember thinking to myself, if I just let go of the wheel, and it was that thought that was like, and this is why you need help. Like, you need help because you can't have thoughts like that and you're driving in the car by yourself. Like, it's not okay. Like, you're not okay. And so I was honest when I went to the evaluation and they asked me, like, you know, all these questions. It's like this big long questionnaire that they have to ask you. And when they got to the question of, have you ever had suicidal ideation? I was like, yes, I have. And because there's one, my mom always told me growing up, you don't lie to your lawyer and you don't lie to your doctor. And so I, you know, felt like, well, I need to be honest, especially because I wanted help for what I was feeling. And so I told them yes, and they're like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10. And I said 10, and she said, okay, when's the last time you had a thought? And I said, on the way here. And that must have been like a really big red flag, because then it turned into, she said she needed to call a crisis team. And when I heard crisis team, I automatically thought, oh my gosh, they're gonna commit me right now. It's gonna happen. And I remember being hysterical and being like, no, I'm okay, I'm okay. And it was just my luck that the person that was supposed to be a part of the crisis team wasn't there that day. And so they were gonna have to wait longer for someone else to come. So she said, in order for me to let you go, I have to be able to call somebody. Will you allow me to call someone, like, you know, a support? Do you have a support system? And I was like, yeah, you can call my mom. So she calls my mom, she tells my mom what happened, and my mom's like, okay, I'll take responsibility for watching her. But the lady really didn't want to let me go. And so I was telling my mom, I was like, they're gonna commit me, like, what am I gonna do? And my mom's like, it's okay, calm down, it's okay, like, I'm gonna talk to her. They ended up letting me go. And when I got home, my mom was like, I think my mom came home early that day. But it sped up the process of me getting a therapist. And so I saw the therapist and I saw her a few times, and, you know, I talked to her, but it was like things were just not getting better. They just were not getting better. They were getting worse. And some other things had happened in my life that were like unrelated, but because at the time, like, I was hypersensitive to everything. And so there was a comment that was made to me, and it was the comment that really triggered me. And because of how it triggered me, I knew just therapy isn't going to be enough. And so I was like, I need to go on medication. And that was the hardest hardest choice I had to make, because it was something that I said I never wanted to do. But I knew I have to do something, and if you're gonna fight, you're gonna have to fight with everything that you have in you. And so I went to an emergency mental health hospital where you go and they, you know, prescribe you medication. And so they gave me 2 things to take, one thing for me to sleep and one thing for me to take during the day. And so I was taking those things, but they were not working. It wasn't helping me sleep. It was making me feel worse mentally. And so, you know, I went back again and they upped the dosage, and then that kept happening, and I went back again and they upped the dosage. I'm like, it's not working. It's making me feel worse. And so it was like, well, it's going to take 6 months to get into your system before you actually see something. Then it was, well, it's going to take a year. And I was just like, I don't have time for this. Like, I need it to work now. And why is nobody telling me the same? I'm getting different answers from everybody. But at this time, I was also waiting to see a psychiatrist to be diagnosed. And when I went to see the psychiatrist, I had a huge panic attack, because I was like, if I go into the psychiatrist and I cry even a little bit, he's going to commit me. Like, that was the biggest fear. I always felt like I was going to be committed. And so I was like, he's going to commit me. And I remember having a panic attack and me trying to call my mom, but the phone call wasn't going through. And then that made it worse. And it was just like this big thing. And by the time I went in to see him, I was hysterically crying. And I was like, okay, this is what you were trying to avoid. And now look. And so I go in, and he was so rude. And I was sitting there and I'm crying, and he's like, I can understand you if you're crying. You need to stop crying. And so I'm like trying to stop crying. And then he asked me like a few questions about like my symptoms. But he saw me for less than 5 minutes, and he was like, okay, you're bipolar 1 and you have generalized anxiety disorder. And I was like, excuse me, I don't think I'm bipolar. And he's like, yep, that's what you are. And so I remember after that, he wanted to prescribe me 4 different medications to take. 1 to take when I woke up, 1 to take in the middle of the day, 1 to take, it was like 1 to bring me up, 1 to bring me down, 1 to level me out, 1 to sleep. And it was just like, you're doing a lot. I'm not taking all this medication. And so when he did that, I was like, I'm not taking the medication. And I said that I wasn't going to take the medication that I previously was taking, and I'm not going to take the medication that he's prescribing to me now. And I remember being really upset and telling my therapist, they worked in the same office, and I, you know, told her, like, he said that I'm bipolar, and I don't think I'm bipolar. And she was like, well, you do have mood swings. And I'm like, no, but I don't think that it's bipolar. And he only saw me for 5 minutes. How would he know that? And so she was like, well, you know, and she kind of like dismissed my feelings. So I was like, yeah, no. And so I stopped seeing her too after that. And again, it was just like, it's bad. Things are so bad. So after I stopped seeing that therapist, I was again feeling like defeated, and that I was more alone than ever, just because I was like, I keep trying really hard to fight through this and push through while still not knowing and understanding why I'm going through this, or why I'm feeling these things, why I'm depressed. But at every turn, it's like I just keep getting hit with thing after thing. And so it was really discouraging for me. And at every time that I felt defeated, it just pushed me deeper into a darker space. And I think it was around that time that my mom was like, I need you to get a Bible that you sleep with, because things were just, it was really, really bad. And I was having more suicidal thoughts, and there were times where I was at home alone because maybe I couldn't go to work with my mom that day. If my brother wasn't, at home, so I was alone. I was scared of what I would have done, or maybe I wouldn't have had, the strength to fight off, having intrusive thoughts. And so my mom was like, you need to get a Bible. It is, even if you never open it, it's something that you sleep with next to you. And at the time, I slept with it in my bed with me. Or not really slept with it because I wasn't sleeping, but like it was always next to me in my bed. And so there was one day where I was having a hard time, and I went through these phases of like moving from one place to another within the house, because I still wasn't leaving the house. Like I didn't even want to go outside to my backyard. I didn't want to walk to the mailbox that was literally right outside the front door. Like I just didn't want to leave to go to any outside space. But I did sometimes push myself to go outside of my room. So I would have moments where I just stayed in my room and I didn't come out of my room, and then I would have moments where I would go into what we called the movie room, because it was like kind of like a, I guess like a den space area, and I stayed there. I would be there morning, night, sometimes where I wouldn't go back into my room. I would just stay in there. And one day I was in there, and I remember saying to myself, I am tired. And it wasn't like how I usually, am like super anxious and, upset and angry, kind of I'm tired. It was kind of almost like a peaceful, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. Don't want to keep fighting. I've given it everything that I can give it. I don't want to do this. I'm tired. I'm tired. That was it. I'm tired. And in that moment, it felt like God placed his hand on my shoulder and was like, hold on. And it was then that he showed me why I was experiencing what I was experiencing, what I was going through, why I was going through it. And he showed me, like I could see it clear as day, like a vision, like it was in front of me, that I was going to help millions of people with depression and anxiety and the things that I was feeling, and that it was going to come way later down the line, and but this is why I was feeling these things, and this is why he was allowing me to, feel such pain. But him showing me that is then what the thing was that made me begin to hold on and just fight a little bit longer, because since I was a little girl, I've always wanted to help people. And, growing up, I always thought like, oh, I'm just going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a teacher. And I would, have pens and papers and notebooks and whiteboards and things. And, I'd always play school with my little stuffed animals. And that's what I thought. I was going to help people because I was going to be a teacher. And then I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. But I always knew that it was going to be something that helped people. Like, I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life. And so when he showed me that, it spoke to me differently to understand that I was going to be able to help people in a way that was unimaginable to me, and that I was only going to be able to help them in such an extensive way because I understood what they were feeling. Because there is nothing that I hate more than to tell somebody, I understand what you're going through, when I don't really understand. If I've never lost a sister before, I can't really tell somebody who just lost their sister, I know what you're feeling. I understand how you feel. You don't. And I've lost someone before, but it wasn't a sister, so I don't know what that feels like. And so because of that, me going through depression in such a deep and intense way was the only way that I was going to be able to help people, because I knew what they were feeling and I could understand what they were feeling, and you know, what they were thinking in the moments that they were thinking it. And it was that gave me my hope back. Even though it was so small, it was still just enough hope that I was going to be okay, I was going to get better, and I wasn't going to be in this feeling forever. That helped me keep fighting, because right before I was shown that, I was done. I would not be here right now if God had not showed me that in that moment when he did. And I'm extremely thankful that it happened that way and that he showed me. But I also believe that he doesn't make any mistakes, and there's a reason that I had to get to that point before he revealed to me why I was going through what I was going through. But definitely that was the thing. That was definitely the thing that helped me even get to where I am right now. So after, you know, seeing that and understanding why I was going through what I was going through, it was like, but I'm showing you what's going to come of this. But you have so much more that you have to experience, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to get harder. But you need to hold on to the fact that this is why you're doing it, and this is what's coming if you just stay the course and trust that I'm guiding you with purpose. And that is why the sermon that I told you guys earlier that I was watching with TD Jake's daughter, that is why when she said, you know, Mary was, you know, it was like reiterated to Mary, like, oh, you know, these good things are going to happen, but you have so much more bad things that are going to happen before that good thing happens, that it resonated with me why I needed to talk about my journey through my, you know, depression, because it was that moment, that same moment that she's saying that happened with Mary, that happened with me, in God showing me, this is why you're going through what you're going through, and this is why you're feeling what you're feeling, and this is why I need you to hold on and trust me. And one thing God does not do is lie. And boy, did it get worse before it started to get better. And I had plenty of moments after that where I was like, okay, but when is it gonna get there? When am I gonna start feeling better? Because I know I have to go through so much more, but how much more can I take? I don't know that I can take any more of this. I don't know that I can go through anything worse than what I'm already feeling. Like, what's worse than, you know, not wanting to be here anymore? Like, I don't understand. And I had plenty of times where I kept going back to the I don't want to do this anymore. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. And of course, when you are in a dark space, it's really hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because all you see is darkness. You don't see any light. There is no light. And I had to use the thing that God showed me to tell me that there was light there, even though I couldn't see it, because I couldn't see it. And even though I knew that this was all for purpose, I was going to help people, it still did not make it any easier for me to go through. It helped me to have hope that I wasn't going to feel this forever, but it didn't make the journey easier. It almost, in a sense, made it harder for me to go through, because then I started to wonder, okay, when is that coming? Because now I think I'm ready now. When is it coming? Like, now I think it's the time for me to start to feel better. And it just felt like it was never coming. And, you know, there were things that were told to me that I was supposed to be doing, like, you need to be posting and sharing your experience. And I wasn't doing it because I was like, that's so scary. I don't want to share that, or I'll pick and choose what I want to share. And I was kind of posting some things on Instagram here and there. Like, there were some times where I was, you know, feeling really bad. And so I was like, okay, I'll just, you know, post that because I'm supposed to be posting, but nothing consistently, because I'm so private that it was so hard for me to, like, it's not for you. It's not for you. And telling myself that it's not for me, like, you're not doing this for your benefit. You're doing this for somebody else's benefit. So really, it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is for you to do. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And the more that I didn't listen to what God was telling me to do, the worse things were. And so then I started to feel like I was being punished, because it was like, well, you're not listening, so this is why things are getting worse for you. And so that made it harder for me to go through. And it wasn't until I got to a point of understanding, like, God is not punishing you. He is making you go through all of these things and feel all of these feelings of doubt and being unsure of, you know, things, and not understanding, and, you know, feeling pain and feeling hurt and feeling all these things, and losing people along the way, and, you know, putting faith in things or people and then things not happening, or getting like these, you know, bursts of energy to be like, oh, now I'm better and I can do all of these things. I have all of these ideas, all for things to just fall and crumble apart, and for nothing to really come into fruition, because you need to feel those things to be able to relate to somebody else that is feeling those same things. And so I feel like I went on this journey of depression from the ignoring the feeling and thinking something's wrong but not really being sure, up until the point of, I don't want to be here anymore. And the only thing that I could not relate to someone suffering from depression or any mental illness is an attempted suicide. Like, I've never attempted anything. I've gotten right up until the point, but I've never actually attempted anything. And that would be the only one thing that I couldn't say to somebody, I know how you feel, if they have done that. But I feel like that was done on purpose, because my purpose is to prevent people from getting to that point where they have attempted. And I believe that everything else that I have experienced, in the depth that I have experienced it, God did that on purpose, so I can explain to somebody before they get to that point, I know what you're feeling, and we don't have to do that. This is, you know, this is what we can do, or let's try this, or, you know, I've been there before. Let me tell you what I did or how I got through it, or maybe I didn't feel like I got through it, but I'm still here so you can still fight. And so, you know, this back and forth and this struggle up until maybe a year ago, did I start to kind of see a shift or a turn, that I was, you know, kind of getting some of my motivation back. But it was because I found another therapist by accident. I have this thing where I just don't like doctors. When I was 11, I had a bad experience with a doctor, and so that kind of triggers me, so I don't like doctors. But more recently, I have been trying to, like, you know, get healthy and like really understand what's going on with my body. And I have really severe stomach issues, but I've just dealt with it my whole life because I don't like doctors. But about a year ago, I was like, you know what? Let me go to the doctor and find out what's wrong with my stomach. And in going to the doctor to find that out, I got a really nice doctor. And, you know, it was on record that I had seen a therapist before, that I had technically been diagnosed bipolar 1 and generalized anxiety disorder. That she said, you know, can I recommend a therapist to you? And I explained to her, like, I'm not really interested in therapy. I've tried twice, it didn't work. And she's like, well, let me just, you know, I'll do the work. I'll find one for you, and you just have to show up. And if you don't like it, then you don't have to go. And so I was like, okay, like, it's not gonna hurt anything. So I did. I went, and my first therapy session with my current therapist now, I went and I walked in there, and I was 100% honest with him and told him, like, I am here because it was recommended to me, but I do not have high hopes because I've had 2 bad experiences, and I'm not going to put my 100% into this because I don't trust you. And it's not because you've done anything to me, but simply because I've had 2 bad experiences where I have trusted therapists and it didn't work out. And so I explained to him the things that happened, and even he was like, yeah, that's a lot. I'm surprised that you're here. And I said, well, I'm surprised that I'm here too. But I felt like, you know, it was a part of my journey. I had to try. And that also, I feel like I can be a good advocate of, you know, therapy is not for everybody, because I do 100% believe that therapy is not for everybody, but that if it is something you want to expose yourself to, finding a therapist is a really hard thing to do. So to not be discouraged if you don't get a good one the first try, because it took me 3 tries, and I'm sure there are probably people who have taken way more than 3 tries to find a good therapist. I just happened to have found one on the 3rd try. But I also was really honest with him about the fact that I didn't want to take medication and I don't want to be committed. And if at any time I feel like either of those things could happen, I will stop coming. And he was very honest with me about his stance, and he was very understanding towards me, and he didn't push, and he, you know, made me feel very comfortable, and he understood my, you know, apprehension and, you know, all that stuff. And eventually when I started to feel like I could trust him, I started opening up more. And, you know, so now I think I've been seeing him for maybe 4-ish months. And I don't have any complaints. I think he's really good at his job. He definitely tells me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And even though that's obviously hard, because you don't want to hear things that you don't want to hear, but it definitely has helped me thus far. And I think once finding a good therapist, that kind of helped me turn the corner a bit, to be able to actively work through my depression versus actively work through having suicidal ideation. Because up until then, it was like that was the thing that I was fighting. I wasn't really fighting my depression itself. I was fighting not having suicidal thoughts. And once I found a good therapist, I was able to shift my fight to, okay, now I'm fighting through my depression, not just having suicidal thoughts. And so I think that's where my turn kind of started. And still to this day, you know, he's asked me like, where do you think it all stems from? Or, you know, what do you think triggered it? And I have no idea. I genuinely don't know what triggered me into a depression. I don't know where it stems from. I don't know definitively. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what triggered me, but definitively I don't know where it stems from. I have ideas, but I'm not sure. So it's become more of me just working through my everyday feelings and less of trauma, per se, because I don't know exactly. Therapy definitely has brought up some things that I didn't know were there before. That's, you know, personal to me. Yeah, so it definitely has brought up some things that kind of explain certain things, and maybe at some point I'll be ready to talk about them, but right now not so much. But definitely it has helped me work through my like everyday thought process, because even still, like, I am miles and miles better than what I was 4 years ago, but I definitely still have a lot of days that are not good. They're not my worst days. By far, they're not my worst days, but I definitely still have days where I'm not good, and it's hard for me to get out of the bed, and I don't have motivation to do things. But I say that I'm better because I'm at least able to do some things. Even if I, you know, get out of the bed for an hour and get back in the bed, that's still progress, because there were times when I wouldn't move from the bed. So, and I don't have those kind of days as often as I used to. My bad days now are more like lack of motivation to do things. So I won't stay in the bed all day. I'll go upstairs and, you know, lay on the couch all day, but it's still improvement than from what it was. So I'm not better. I wouldn't say that I'm better, but I would say that I'm better than I was. And so I'm proud of myself for how far I've come, because I could have, well, for sure I could have not been here, but I definitely could be in a much worse place than I am currently. So yeah, but I feel that because I know why I'm going through what I'm going through, more recently I've been better at, you know, posting and sharing. And I do think that it probably helps more people than I know that it helps. Because, you know, everybody's not going to be open to share and, you know, to comment and, you know, all of that. And I 100% understand that and respect that and all of that. So even if I don't see it, you know, visually in front of me that it's helping people, I trust in my heart that I am helping somebody, because a lot of people suffer in silence and don't speak up and don't say anything. But I know that if they watch this video or any of my videos, that they can relate to something that I've said, and silently it helps them, even if they don't voice it out loud, because that's okay. It's okay to not share with everybody, or, you know, open up if that's where your comfort is. But sometimes just knowing that you're not alone helps. It definitely has helped me. But with the few things that I have gotten, you know, some feedback from, where, you know, people are supportive, and whether they're being supportive towards me and telling me like, you know, hang in there, you're doing so amazing, or if people are commenting and saying this helped me, like, thank you for sharing, definitely makes it easier for me to share, with also knowing that this is what my purpose in life is. So I'm very grateful for God to give me such a huge task to, you know, follow through. But I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't scary, and that I don't doubt myself or question myself sometimes that I'm capable of doing this, because it's such a huge thing. And the way that I envision it, or the way that I hold it to such high standards of, my mission of doing this is to genuinely save lives. Like, I'm trying to save someone's life, and that's a big deal. And so for him to place it on my heart to share, and for it to be a part of my purpose to be able to do that, I can't think of a better way to help people. And since that is what I've wanted to do my entire life, I definitely am grateful and appreciate that he trusts me with such a huge thing. Yeah, so, but, you know, currently I'm still fighting through it and pushing through it, and I will continue to. I am determined not to give up, and I genuinely hope that anybody that watches this video, it gives you some kind of comfort to know that you're not alone if you're experiencing anything that I've shared, or if you know, read between the lines of some things and, you know, you related with that, whatever it is. I hope that that definitely helps give you some type of reassurance, and that you don't give up your fight, and that you keep going, because you are here for a reason. You have purpose in this world, and, you know, it's not your time. And when it's your time, it is not to say that it's your time. It is God's way. It's God who tells you, you know, when it's your time. So, that's, you know, pretty much, you know, summed up my journey from the beginning up until now. If I went through every single detail, we'd be here for like days. But for the most part, I feel like those are the most significant things that I can remember that stand out to me, because definitely going through depression, my memory is not what it used to be, and so I definitely black out a lot, and a lot of things are kind of a blur. So I try to share things that were vital and that I can remember happened, and I hope all of that comes across. And yeah, so thank you for watching. This was a very hard video for me to film, probably one of the hardest ones that I will ever film, because it's probably the most vulnerable that I've been thus far. If you have made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate you watching, and I would love for you to comment if you know, if this video touched you, if you felt like it was relatable. I want to talk to you guys, so definitely feel free to start a conversation and create a support team with the community of mental health, because that's ultimately a goal too of mine. So Anyways, I will stop rambling. I love you guys, and this is at the end of every single video on my outro, but this specific video, I just want to say it for myself just in case you don't read it. Just remember that no matter what you're going through, your story is definitely not over. I love you guys.